Today I'm going to be sharing with you a passage from the 12th chapter of Matthew's Gospel. And the 12th chapter of Matthew is kind of a hinge chapter in the entire book. Jesus has been increasingly in conflict with the scribes, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law. And in chapter 12, in verses 1 through 14, this really goes to a new level with two conflicts over the behavior of Jesus and his disciples on the Sabbath. The first is Jesus and the disciples, they're hungry and they pluck heads of grain and eat them on the Sabbath. And the Pharisees, who are seemingly following Jesus and the disciples around, looking to criticize them for something they do wrong, say, "Look, your disciples are doing what's not lawful to do on the Sabbath." And Jesus responds, "Have you not read?" And he uses that phrase a couple times about David and how they ate, and "Have you not read?" And then he says, "If you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." And then he leaves that place, and there's another controversy. He's in the synagogue, and he heals a man with a withered hand on the Sabbath. And again, the Pharisees are upset. And verse 14 in chapter 12, this is again that kind of hinge verse, "But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him how to destroy him." So to this point in Matthew's gospel, Jesus has been about trying to reach the people of Israel, trying to reach his fellow Jews. But now with the Pharisees conspiring to destroy him, things start to swing in verses 15 to 21. And many crowds followed him. He cured all of them. And this was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet Isaiah. And then we twice hear this phrase, first in verse 18 and then verse 20. He will proclaim justice to the Gentiles. And then again, he will not break a bruised reed or quench a smoldering wick until he brings justice to victory. As we talk about Matthew's image of the church being a household of justice, here you have Matthew in the hinge chapter in his book, quoting from the prophet Isaiah, and the repetition of that God's Messiah, God's servant, on whom God's Spirit rests, is going to proclaim justice to the Gentiles and is going to be devoted, and yet with a level of compassion that he wouldn't even break a bruised reed or quench a smoldering wick until he brings justice to victory. I suspect there are many of us who are Christians who don't necessarily associate Jesus' mission with bringing justice to victory. But that's exactly what Matthew says Jesus is coming to do. And it's because of that as Christians, we are called to be advocates for justice. And as a church, we are to be a household of justice, because that's part of what Jesus comes to do, to bring justice to victory and to proclaim justice to those who were outside of the Jewish faith at his time. And for us, that gives us motivation to be instruments of justice for all.